My name is Mallory, and I'm going to be talking about how Disney helped me study for APUSH. Tonight I'm going to be talking about how it helped me learn the founding of the new nations. I'll be talking about Atlantis, Cinderella, and the Little Mermaid, and how that actually correlates to the whole history thing. So first I'm going to be talking about Atlantis. So Atlantis is about this guy named Milo. He leads his whole team to go to Atlantis, the lost city. But he starts out as a dreamer, a historian to be more exact. Everyone thinks he's crazy. And he ends up getting a beneficiary to donate all this money so that he and his team can go. And what happens is they take up all their stuff and go on this huge adventure. And they take boats and everything and they go down in the water and to find this lost city. But when they get there, they find people there, and they weren't expecting to find those people there. They expected it to be like a lost culture, civilization, and just extract all the riches and all that. However, this is similar to Christopher Columbus discovering the Americas. Christopher Columbus was paid for by the Spanish people. When he got there, he was expecting to go to the West Indies, but he found something else there instead. He found the North Americans pretty much. Kind of a big discovery there, but it was all accidental, just kind of like finding the people over here in Atlantis. And when he gets there, they end up taking all the money and all their resources to get there. It's kind of an interesting story. Similarly, North America was also not really a big deal with the land bridge and everything. The land bridge was actually how they got over there in the first place. People just followed them along thinking there's like, oh, look, deer, let's follow the deer. And so eventually, over time, though, that land bridge sunk underwater, or somehow water filled it, probably from glaciers melting. But when that happened, though, it cut off the connection between the two worlds, separating the old world from the new world. Similarly, in Atlantis, the whole city is sunk and cut off from the new world, the civilizations of the time. So it's kind of interesting how much the two share in common. It's pretty cool. So next up, we're going to be talking about The Little Mermaid. But in order to understand how this actually correlates with history, it's probably easier to start with the history part, which starts off in 1763, starting with all of the acts throughout history. So in 1763, the first act that was passed by the British was the navigation laws, which restricted trades and put restrictions on all of the colonies, which was caused some trouble. So it wasn't a very good response from the colonists. Then in 1764, the Sugar Act came about. It increased taxes on foreign sugars imported from West Indies and was protested bitterly, but in the end the British ended up lowering the duty substantially. Then in 1765, the Stamp Act was passed. This raised revenues to support the new military force, but the colonists cried, no taxation without representation, and things like that, and they even started the Stamp Act Congress, and they even claimed, but then for the British side, they claimed that the colonists still had virtual representation and how they repealed it. Then in 1774 came the Intolerable Acts. This closed the Boston Harbor until damages could be paid, and but the colonists then summoned the First Continental Congress. Pretty much all of these acts and things could be summarized into saying like the colonists always had a reaction to the British, and the British had to respond to that reaction. It's just a huge chain of reactions that ended up to the leading up to the Revolutionary War. Now, where does the Little Mermaid come into all this, you might ask? But if you think about it with all the symbolism and everything, you could probably interpret that the Little Mermaid is like the colonist. She keeps refusing her father, King Triton and all of that. He represents the British. So what he ends up doing is he tells Ariel, you cannot go to the surface anymore to see humans and things like that, in fear of being caught and everything. Yet the Little Mermaid Ariel decides, I'm going to go to the surface anyway. She ends up even falling in love. So that was her reaction to that. But in reaction to that, though, the British king was like, well, King Triton in this case, he said no more of that. You can't do anything. And he destroyed all of her entire collection of American goods and human things like that. And yet, Ariel also had a reaction. She wasn't going to give up there. She ended up turning into a human to go on the surface and live up there to meet her dream guy. But in the end, Ariel ended up winning because her father gave in. He couldn't let her daughter be unhappy. So in a way, that's kind of like how the British ended up giving in towards the end of the war. So now for the last part, we've got Cinderella. In this part, for the history part, it kind of goes intertwined with the last part about all the acts and being virtually represented. In this case, Cinderella represents the colonies and how they do all of the work, whereas the stepsisters represent the British and how their family, but they end up doing like not a lot for Cinderella. They kind of leave her on the side to do all the work. Yet, when it comes time for the ball, they're like, oh, you're virtually represented. You don't need to go. Why would you need to go? And then, as far as the rats go, her little mice friends, those are like all the little American patriots, and they have little town meetings to support Cinderella. They even make a dress for her to go to the ball and sneak out. So, just kind of like a little interesting history part there. Thought it'd be cool. So, in the end, that's how Disney and all those movies, Cinderella, Atlantis, Little Mermaid, helped me to memorize all the APUSH things and the founding of a new nation. So, thought I'd like to share. So, enjoy your night.